I hope you by now are starting to have a greater sense of your body right now. I offer you a traditional story from Finland. There was a man who chose to become a monk. And he went to the monastery and he decided not just to become a monk, but to take a vow of silence. And it would last for 5 years before he could speak again. And he engaged in his vow of silence. After 5 years, he sat before the abbot, and the abbot said, "What would you like to say?" And the monk said, "I had a hard time at first with the concept of the Trinity, but after much reflection, I've accepted that that is the way of the teaching of the Lord. And I had it was a little frustrating at first to get up at 4 a.m. every morning, but that too, I have come to accept." And the abbot said, "Was there anything else you'd like to say?" And the monk just shook his head. The abbot said, "Okay, well, let's have this chat again in 5 years." The monk went back to his vow of silence, living in the monastery, and 5 years later sat before the abbot for their conversation. And the abbot said again, "What would you like to say?" And the monk said, "Well, I did have trouble at first with the catechism, but that too, I think, is the wise path. And I, frankly, sometimes got bored and frustrated with the bowl of gruel every day, but that too, I have come to accept as the holy path." And the abbot again said, "Is there anything else?" The monk just shook his head. And the abbot said, "Okay, well, I'll see you again in 5 years." 5 years went by, vow of silence sustained. And again, the monk sat in front of the abbot, and the abbot said again, "What would you like to share?" And the monk said, "Well, I had some trouble with accepting the idea of divine grace. But, that truly is the holy journey. And frankly, it's getting harder and harder to sleep on the hard, cold floor, but that too makes me better." And the abbot looked and said, "Is there anything else?" And the monk said, "Yes, I am leaving now." And the abbot said, "Finally, you've done nothing but complain and kvetch since you've been here. Whether you have been contemplating deep theological questions or perhaps enduring discomfort with your body, it matters what we do with our body. It matters." So I invite you for just a moment, ask your body how it's doing. When was the last time you just checked in with your body and said, "How are you?" So I invite you to go ahead and do that now. Just ask your body, "How are you?" Take a moment. Nobody's watching for most of you. The cameras are off. It's okay. Most of the time when we're checking in with our body, it's because it wants something. It wants to eat. It wants sleep or water. It wants a bathroom break, or it's full of aches and pains that want to be fixed. But wouldn't it be extraordinary if every morning upon waking, we said, "Good morning, body, how are you?" And every evening upon falling asleep, we said, "Body, how are you? Good evening." What if we even went a step further and said, "I love you, body"? That would be hard for so many. A lot of people are wearing these smartwatches. My husband has one, and the smartwatches remind us when to stand up, to keep standing up through the day. They remind us to take many, many steps through the day, and there are goals that one can achieve. Wouldn't it be extraordinary if that body watch, if our smartwatch reminded us also that our bodies are holy and precious and need to be loved, and they're sacred, and that they're beautiful, beautiful bodies. Instead, too often we exhibit too much internal and external hatred of our bodies. We rarely affirm their beauty. Instead, we distrust our bodies too often. We treat our bodies as if they're commodities to be bought and sold, to be bartered, as if they are something that belongs to somebody else. Too often, our bodies are stolen from us. Literally, slavery, sex trafficking, immigrants kidnapped for ransom, sex workers in the name of brutalized capitalism. Our bodies are also stolen in cases of rape, of assault, of emotional abuse, of racial and ethnic abuse, of ageism and ableism. All these forms of aggression and neglect and violence, they steal our bodies away from the holder. The victim becomes emotionally disconnected from this sacred vessel. It can take years for reattachment, so to speak, for the healing of the brokenness of the heart and the spirit, to bring the senses back into awakening after they've been traumatized. I ask you, how is your body right now? What we do with our body matters. There are a lot of cultures that are actively discouraging us from being in touch with our bodies. For all of my male identified friends out there, how many of you scoffed when I asked you to check in with your body? How many of you actually did it? Even with the camera turned off and no one there to judge, just checking in with our body can transform a moment of disconnect to presence in the moment. Traditionally, masculinity has been teaching us that the body is a tool, a means to an end, a force in life to achieve goals and outcomes, a weapon to subdue, control, and enforce power. None of which affirm love, compassion and empathy, weakness, or vulnerability. Too often, traditional femininity teaches the body is a tool as well, a means to an end to be subjugated, to be manipulated into false images of perfection and beauty and passivity, none of which affirms strength, skill, assertiveness. And women are continually judged when their bodies are not meeting the norm of a culture and society. Our non-binary and trans friends and family, they are challenging us with these false images. They raise our awareness to all these messages we have received and been continuing on through life, to more acutely pause on our demands that we place upon each other to conform to social expectations that can be cruel and oppressive. How is it with your body right now? It matters. I suspect you're feeling some stress. There is a lot of stressful triggers internally, messages we send ourselves and externally right now. And I'm actually not going to list those stressful triggers because that in itself can be a trigger to list a long list. You know what they are, and the impact on our body, hormones that disconnect and separate us from ourself. Stress raises blood pressure, increases our heart rhythm, and tense muscles. We need to be breathing. Breathe. It is crucial to our living and our healing process. It is why our physicians and nurses are telling us again and again to exercise is to get the blood flow and oxygen going. Crucial to our brain also for aging. Get the blood flowing into those neurons. The stress, it can move around our body. It can surprise us too many times. Many years ago, I was doing a lot of work with my own church community and for my ministers association. I was in a new marriage and becoming a stepmother and a grandmother, and the stress in my body. I started having panic attacks. I didn't know what they were at first. Heart beating rapidly, oxygen not quite going through my brain, lightheadedness. I went to the doctor and they put a heart monitor on me. It said, I'm fine. And then it hit me. This was how my body was telling me I was stressed and needed to pay attention. As soon as I identified it, the stress reaction stopped. How is it with your body? It matters so much. So I invite you just for a moment to pay attention, maybe just your hand. Just look at your hand for a moment. And what an extraordinary act of engineering and creativity this hand is. And appreciate it and love it and all the things that the hand can do. Even with time and arthritis, our hands are still beautiful for what they can do with our heart, what they can do with a hug on ourselves and our beloved. Our hands are acts of creation and receiving and giving. Just for a moment, I invite you to think about your body. For those who are engaged in sports or dance, these are strict disciplines that invite a deep body connections to feel the body in every muscle and joint, constantly asking us, how is it with my body? Most of us do not have that discipline, but we can engage in yoga, meditation, even theater training reminds us the breath from the gut, not from here, but from the gut. Singing brings breath back into focus with the relationship with muscles and blood flowing. Drew Dellinger in that beautiful piece that reminded us that every particle foaming into existence, transcribing the ineffable through our body. I invite to remember that we are holistic human beings, not separate from our brains and our minds. There is no duality of mind and body. We are holistic beings. And a healthy religion, a healthy faith will keep reminding us of that a holistic spiritual path teaches the body is sacred vessel to be cared for and loved, because this is the source and the act of creation and creativity and the source of life. So I invite you to never, never be ashamed of your body. Oh, this is particularly hard. So many messages, external messages, internal messages, long formed, to never be ashamed. This is a source that needs healing. One of my favorite mystics, Hildegard of Bingen, she talked about passion of the body and the universe all in once. She was so sensuous with her Middle Ages writing, so sensuous. Every creature, she said, every creature is a glittering, glistening mirror of the divinity. Every creature is a glittering, glistening mirror of the divinity. She also wrote, we shall awaken from our dullness and rise vigorously toward justice. If we fall in love with creation deeper and deeper, we will respond to its endangerment with passion. Oh my gosh, I would love to sit down and have a cup of tea with Hildegard. How is your body right now? has the energy shifted, the focus shifted. There is room for other things in our bodies as well. A traditional story from the Ukraine, a Jewish story from the Ukraine, talks about Herschel. Herschel was a man who lived and died with jokes on his lips all the time. And as he was dying in the last hour of his death, he was gathered around by his family and his rabbi. And the rabbi said, Herschel, are you ready now to be more serious with life at this moment of death? And Herschel, in weakness, said, why start now? But Herschel, death is upon us, and will call upon your name into you to enter to death. Oh, Herschel said, I shall tell him I am Moses. Oh, the rabbi said, death will know you're not Moses, you're Herschel. Herschel said, then why did he ask? Exasperated at this last moment, the rabbi said to Herschel, death will ask you how you have mended yourself and how you have mended the world. What are you going to say to that? Herschel said, I will tell him I have mended my socks. Rabbi shook his head, giving up at this last moment. And Herschel said, I do have one request. Come closer. I have one important request. When you are laying my body down into its final resting place in the coffin, do not pick me up by my armpits in the back. And Herschel died. The room was silent. Everybody wondering what Herschel meant by this. And this, with one voice, started suddenly saying, Herschel, what does that mean? We don't understand. And Herschel's eyes flew open, and a voice from beyond this world responded, I've always been ticklish there. Just don't touch. I love that story because it reminds us the importance that our bodies need to laugh, to let out the stress. My friends, it matters what our bodies are doing so that we can give voice and speak and break vows of silence when we're faced with injustice. It matters that we can speak out against oppression. It matters that we can laugh when life has shown us its sense of humor once again. It matters that we are able to sing when joy and lamentation need to be coming from our lips, when our pain and suffering has grown too deep and wide. Our bodies need to experience all of this. My friends, your bodies are precious. They are beautiful. They are beautiful. Care for your bodies. Check in with your bodies. Be one with your bodies. Let the passion of life guide you as I keep trying to do with myself. And I'll remind ourselves, this is actually part of our third Unitarian Universalist principle. The spiritual growth begins, I believe, with our body. Blessed be and amen.